for me, the kind of aha moment at the beginning of my journey to write The Sum of Us was when I stumbled upon the research that really digs into this zero sum idea, lays it over the idea of group status threat, of white reaction to demographic change, this whole sort of kind of body of research that is looking at what becoming a um, country with no racial majority, I'll put it that way, because it's not totally clear, kind of, that you can lump all people of color together or say majority minority, which makes no sense whatsoever.
Right.
I will just say that has no single racial majority numerically. What that will mean, what that does to white consciousness, and to consciousness to people who have been taught for generations to disdain and distrust people of color, and who have experienced a very hierarchical society, right? We have a society where there is a dollar value to human worth, right? And that's communicated in manifold different ways. We have creeds and ideals about equality, but that's basically nowhere in the way we actually operationalize our society. Whether it's the right to vote, which should be equal, or it's any kind of human and basic and universal rights. The United States society is one in which 1% of the population owns more wealth than the entire middle class, and nearly half of adult workers are paid low wages, around $10 an hour, and can't meet their basic needs, right? So this is a highly hierarchical society, and for a very long time, for the vast majority of our history, and I go into this in the book in the first chapter called The Zero Sum Racial Hierarchy, to find out sort of where did the zero sum story come from. For the vast majority of our history, that has been attached to skin color, and yet in a really kind of interesting strategic way. And this is where I really had to kind of stretch my own muscle of empathy, and because as the descendant of enslaved peoples in the United States myself, it's hard for me to kind of go back in history and think, well, what if it had been different? And was the zero sum actually true, right? Today, it's a lie in the sense that progress for people of color does not have to come at white people's expense. In fact, our racial economic inequalities are costing the United States economy dearly. We know that diversity, leads to better outcomes in institutions, all of these different ways in which it is a myth and it's a lie and it's a fear-based belief, but it's not true. But then I had to think, okay, where did this come from? The original economic policy of the United States and the colony, right? The colonies, the stolen land and stolen people and stolen labor. And um, in that instance, yes, obviously, progress for the profits of for white people came directly at the expense of
Right.
people of color, right? It was totally a zero sum. All that people of color had was taken. There was no sharing, right,
Right.
of the profits. And yet, it's also true that the people who were the major beneficiaries of that economic system were at that time, as today, an economic elite, a narrow, self-interested elite. And what happened was they used this sense of white hierarchy, this newfound notion of race and a sort of coherent racial identity, to capture what was many different peoples, right? Many different European peoples on the continent, into the singular white race, and put it up on an elevated status hierarchy. No matter how little land you had, how little opportunity you had, how much you were actually, a servant with very little real freedom, you were still better than being Black, or better
Right.
than being a heathen Indian, or whatever it was at the time. And that was a really important way to ensure the loyalty of the white masses to the white elite, despite their material circumstances. And throughout the book, I talk about how the selling of that zero sum story by a self-interested, narrow white elite has renewed itself generation after generation. And if you look at today's media landscape and today's political landscape, It is literally like plutocrats selling the idea that white people should side with them rather than other struggling people of color.